we'll make a start again. I know that we're just got a little technical glitch with the live streaming, but we are recording and we will post them up later. But it's just a little glitch. And if they can, it's working, cool. So we're back on the live stream now, which is really great. I'll hand over to Jesse and Claire. Where you go. Thank you.
Chair, through you, today I just wanted to bring to Council a briefing on the work to develop the 2737 regional land transport plan, overseen by the Canterbury Regional Transport Committee. From off the back of the presentation, just had about the regional public transport plan, and it is linked. So we might be able to cover off a few of the questions that arose through that discussion as well as we move through. Just wanted to note too, from the last council meeting on the 25th of June, there was a bit of a discussion around the RTC documents, and so we went back through the recording and got a couple of questions out of that discussion. You have will receive an email from governors or councils if you have received it yet, and that just has covers a couple of topics there, which was around the rural school bus safety and also the alignment.
I wonder, Craig, just jumping in here, I wonder if it's worth noting how the RTC is informed by the Transport Officers Group, because I think people sometimes think it sort of exists, it levitates, RTC does, but there's a whole group of people that feed that information up to RTC. So, Claire, maybe you can start with that, what helpful.
Okay. So what we'll cover today is what is the RLTP. So we're heading into RLTP season. Why is the RLTP an important document and process? Because the process with some of these plans is sometimes as important as the final plan itself. We'll talk about the RTC, and I can talk about the Transport Officers Group underneath that as requested. And Jesse will talk about the Canterbury Regional Council's contribution and the work in that space. And then into kind of like the project update space. So that's kind of funded through the LTP, that project. So giving you an update on that. And then questions at the end. So that'll be hopefully what we get through. So the RLTP is kind of like a collective impact document. It's how a group of organisations will work together to invest in the region for transport outcomes. Under the Land Transport Management Act, it contributes to an effective, efficient and safe land transport system. It needs to be consistent with the government policy statement that's in at the time that the council approves it, when the RTC approves it. And it has to take into account, as a collective impact plan, it has to take into account the broader context around energy, police activities, RMA framework, which makes it a little bit different from when you're doing your RPTP where you're just thinking about the transport network. So it's an integrated, collective, collaborative plan. You might notice on the slides that there's a little karere when I'm talking about the document. The RLTP is the high-level view. So it's like a bird flying over the Canterbury Plains looking down. It's not in the details. that you might look at. It is that bird's eye view of transport outcomes and the transport network. It includes objectives, policies and measures across a range of transport areas: road safety, emissions reduction, resilience of the network to natural hazards. So it's big and broad, which is quite a challenge in creating the document. It has priorities for at least 10 years, which runs across education and awareness campaigns, public transport, local roads, state highways. Some of the stuff in the energy and fleet transition space is more context for that investment. So we do talk about that in the narrative of the plan, and we have to take that into account, but we're not directing that through the policies and work program in the plan itself. There's a financial forecast that is from all funding sources. So we tend to talk about this in three ways: local share, which we kind of don't define any deeper. That's the councils in the Jessie hat space to consider how they're going to contribute and develop that local share. We talk about the national amount coming from NZTA and Crown. If there is significant private or philanthropic investment, we may note that in the narrative. So I think last time we had Ashburton Freight Hub was noted in there, because it wasn't an activity directly through that plan, but it came alongside and had that kind of transport impact. And we also note things like the philanthropic investment in community vehicle trusts, and keeping those running. So it's the whole transport space. What is it becoming? So RLTPs a decade ago were kind of like, how do we make this happen? Let's compile some stuff and create it. Over time, that's shifted and changed. And now it's becoming, across New Zealand, a much more evidence-based integrated investment plan across councils and government. And while some people see it as, oh, you have to have something in it to get money, that's not the process to develop the plan. Or not how I've approached it. And so it does enable integrated and agreed selection and prioritisation of transport activities by the organisations who plan those activities prior to the funding being allocated. And taking this approach improves our alignment with the intention of the LTMA for integrated planning and funding for transport. So you'll now see that there's a different little icon on the slide. So I created this to be the RTC. It's kind of like a table with the little chairs around it. So the committee has mayors from all of the local councils on it. It has a chair of the regional council and a deputy that's appointed by the regional council, and it has a representative from Waka Kotahi, which is their Director of Regional Relationships, Ian Duncan. And the primary role for the develop and implement the Canterbury Regional Land Transport Plan, and then it also has an advocacy role as well. So what sits underneath the RTC is, in the terms of reference, that also gets approved by this council after elections, is the Chief Executives Forum has a strategic advisory function, and then there's TOG, which is the Transport Officers Group, which has the technical advisory function. So that's transport staff from all of the councils in the region. So we meet with them on a regular basis. So for the RLTP, it's going to be monthly. We've asked them to put a day a month aside to contribute to RLTP development. And usually it's quarterly, a day every quarter. So that's where the public transport staff come in to those meetings. So setting up the RTC, after the local government elections, every council nominates representatives to go on the RTC. The regional council has two roles, the neutral chairing and then also providing the Regional Council's view as the Public Transport Authority, particularly during RLTP development. So in RLTP development, there will be 4 decisions made by that committee next year. The first one will be on the strategic framework. So that's the objectives, targets, and investment priorities are in that strategic framework. The 3 months later is the significant, based on that framework that's approved, we then come back to that committee with significance policy, criterias, weightings, and monitoring frameworks, which are then, those are then used 3 months later to come back with a prioritised program of activities. And then once that's approved, 3 months later, we come back to the committee with the draft plan for consultation. And it takes a long time because we are working collaboratively with staff across 10 organisations. 11 DOC comes to that as well. And so we kind of have like a workshop and then give them time to develop their information that comes in. So yeah, if it was just a single organisation with those decisions, maybe you could snap through it a little faster.
I'm just interested by the word neutral in that slide. What do you mean by that?
So in chairing, you're chairing the meeting in a neutral way as a regional council, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I just wouldn't agree with that because the chair does vote, and the chair does have their own views, which they carry on behalf of the council.
Yeah, and Joe, it says and providing the regional council's view. So it's just noting that the chair's role is to, facilitate the meeting, but you're also there as a representative alongside the other regional council representative that's there, because we have 2 on it. No one else does. All good? Yes, Karen.
Sorry, through you, Chair. So yeah, I just mentioned earlier at the beginning, the Regional Council has responsibilities as a public transport authority as well. And as we talked about earlier, that's around creating the Regional Public Transport Plan for both services and infrastructure and aligning that with the Regional Land Transport Plan. And as Len said, one follows the other. And the aim being obviously to provide public transport services funded through the long-term plan and up through the NLTP, through the National Land Transport Fund. So as part of our long-term plan discussions, obviously in annual plan discussions, we have a lot of discussion around our public transport network and the investments that we want to make into that. And we then will feed that as a public transport authority into the development of the regional land transport plan. So as we move through the process that Claire's just outlined, we'll be trying to wear 2 hats here. So Claire as the secretariat, or the lead, sorry, not secretariat. We as a secretariat for the RTC, with Claire as the lead on this project, will be supporting the RTC to develop the plan. And myself and Stuart and others in the public transport team will then be able to support our council around this table to feed our aspirations into the RLTP, and wearing our public transport authority hat, not a road controlling authority hat. That's for the TAs, the territorial authorities, to bring that to the table. So I want to be quite clear on that, because I know previously we've had, when a plan lands and you're asked to adopt it, but you feel like you haven't had the involvement in it, want to get better at that process of bringing that through to council at the stage gates as we move through. So we'll be working closely with our public transport team to do that, and brief council as we move through, and also reflect the conversations back into the RLTP as it develops along the way. And as noted on the screen there as well, we can do variations as well throughout the process. So we've had, in the current RLTP, immediately after it was approved last time, we had 2 variations straight away from NZTA and CCC. And that was just based on the timings issue around LTPs and state highway programs. So last time we had the GPS land quite late, so it was a bit of a muddled process at that point. So hopefully this time around we're a lot more streamlined in that respect. And just on the GPS, I understand we hopefully will have something on that around April next year as well to feed into this process. So that's an indicative time frame at this stage. So, right, Tom.
So just if you in terms of the variation and when a variation is required, the RLTP sets a significance policy that would outline how enabling we're going to be of the councils in the region in their decision making and when we expect them to come with a variation. At the moment, that policy is set at a very high level. So it tends to be, because it's a big long-term strategic document, it would have to be something like, you're not going to improve public transport in Greater Christchurch. Like, it's that kind of level of significance that would then, like, well, if you do that, you might not be doing something in the best interest of the whole region's transport network. It's not things like, I'm trying to think of something that came through, like Diamond Harbour Ferry or something like that. You can have at it, So we try and set an enabling bar through that policy. Oh, yeah. Okay, so and then once you've got the plan, then it kind of goes through the kind of process you guys are quite familiar with in terms of consultations, hearings, deliberations, and then it has a two-stage approval process. The RTC agrees the plan, and then it gets handed to you as the regional council to approve it. And under the Act, even if you don't approve it, it's treated as approved by NZTA for funding purposes. So the approval or not approval of the plan is more of a signal to central government as to your confidence in the process to develop the plan, rather than the content, the transport content of the plan. That the transport content sits with the RTC. So that's how the Act has set it up.
Mentioned the hearings, deliberations, etc. by the RTC.
Oh, yeah, and all the hearings and deliberations are through the RTC as well. Yeah. So where are we at now? So under the LTMA, the strategic framework, that front end of the plan, is set every 6 years. So that's where we're at now. Last time we were in a review phase where we kind of just update the program in the back end of the plan and align that to the front end. And we made some tweaks to that for the emissions reduction context that had shifted. But this time round, we're kind of like a start from scratch. And I use that loosely because, of course, Canterbury exists and there's a network that exists. So you're never starting from scratch on any kind of strategy, really. And there are constraints in Canterbury, such as we are a floodplain and we do have Alps, and that affects how the transport network actually functions. But what it does mean for the project, and so I've got a little icon in the bottom with the many hands coming together, is greater stakeholder engagement, more input from a range of government and council staff, and improving our approach to developing the program and funding section through a co-design process with the councils in the region. So the process is initiation and planning. We've kind of done that, and that's been approved by the committee. And then we're in the stakeholder engagement phase and pivoting into strategy development. And so it just kind of outlines that kind of process that I've said before. And then eventually it'll be finished June 2027. So it's a bit of a process to get there, to bring everybody along.
On that picture, so Jesse, you said it be helpful when those government things land during that process. Would actually be useful to have above that, and say GPS lands around here. That would be pretty helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Through you, Chair. As we know more detail specifically, absolutely we can include more of that detail as we go along. Things are moving a little bit, so we're just conscious of committing to a particular date, but understand April is next year is kind of the indicative date at this stage.
As a rule of thumb, it changes every time the government changes.
Yeah.
As a rule of thumb.
Even it might be, and along there, you could also put like when our key decisions are for an annual plans, long-term plans, and that as well, because obviously they will make a contribution. Yeah.
So there have been attempts in the sector to document all of those interacting timelines and frameworks, and it's so complex that some transport strategy teams and other councils have a wall to put it on. So.
Well, it's good to know I'm thinking down the right lines, though. But anyway,
yeah,
good.
I'm just using Planner and its little Gantt charty function to keep track of it all, but it is really complex, and it does mean that we have a lot of underneath in the project management space, a lot of rescheduling to manage that and ensure that it's all integrated and aligned. And, you know, when the government changed last election, while we were in drafting, I pulled out the National Party manifesto to inform how we would then approach it, because the chances that there would be a new GPS with a different direction was pretty high. So, yeah, we do factor all of those in to try and create the best plan possible.
Can I just say as well, obviously in strategy and planning, we lead in the annual plan discussions and LTP discussions, so we'll make sure that things are aligning and clear to council around those timeframes. So.
Yep, cool. So you'll see on this slide, I've got a little sunrise on the horizon to indicate the strategy development phase of the project. And next time I come back, I'll have another icon for the next phase of the project that we're in. I try and bring sunshine. The transport context at the moment is super complex, uncertain. It's transitioning a lot. So this is largely driven by, the rapid change in technology that's available, drivers in terms of emissions reduction, the environmental impacts in terms of like AF8 being in that long-term planning horizon, or the likelihood of it, health impacts in terms of air pollution, active travel and the importance of that, and then the funding system as well, and that transitioning from a fossil fuel-based funding system to the road user charge, user pays funding system, and however long that takes. This is all part of a really complex context for planning in. The guidance is to take and invest because of the complexity that kind of tool or methodology wouldn't necessarily bring the innovative thinking that we might need in order to create a fit-for-purpose plan. So what we're doing, we're kind of doing a hybrid approach. So I'm using more of a Māori policy framework in terms of kawa, tikanga, ritinga and āhuatanga. For me, āhuatanga I find quite a useful approach when coming to the monitoring framework and what does good look like. But then we will, and so some of the direction I'm setting in the space that I'm working in and the work that's being done aligns a bit more with that. But then, of course, the template that we're given to create the document is still in a traditional Pākehā policy framework, which is quite linear and not as complex. So trying to do the complex work so we get a good plan and then fit it into the template. So it's a bit tricky, having a crack at it, and we'll see if we get it right. And we are also integrating wellbeing across the process as well. So we've had Dr. Anna Stevenson, Dr. Cheryl Doig and Dr. Eric Barnes meeting. So Dr. Eric Barnes is the ILM transport planning guy. He's the guru, and he just published research in January on how to integrate wellbeing into transport planning. So we're kind of trying to push our practice forward in that space, and be a bit of an exemplar, maybe. Who knows? And interestingly, he got interested in integrating wellbeing from the work with the integrated planning guide that was being done in Christchurch, and that kind of post-earthquake space. So it's kind of coming back round full circle. So we've got a partnership approach being developed, Wānanga Heara Tangata Pathways for People in Canterbury, facilitated by Dr. Cheryl Doig and Irihāpiti Pitama Utai from Tōkana Taraki, which will use a Māori futures thinking framework. We looked at Mata Waka input because there are Article 3 of the treaty things in the transport space, but there wasn't the protocols hadn't been put in place for us to do that quickly. So we will be using the Ngāi Tahu feedback in that space. We also had general stakeholder engagement workshops across Ashburton, Amberley, Timaru, and a range of one-on-one meetings with stakeholders who couldn't make that. And that's particularly important to understand some of the more commercially sensitive infrastructure investments that might be being made, and where some of the big infrastructure players are heading. We've had a youth workshop as well, had 25 youth in, I think it was a Waimakariri room, maybe. And so that's been done with our youth engagement team. And then coming up in August will be the RTC Vision Workshop. So we'll have that information by then to feed into the RTC Vision Workshop. And you guys will then have council representatives in that workshop to contribute to the regional vision. Yeah. Yeah.
So
If councillors have things they want to share with us before then let us know. Cool.
through you, Chair, as well, as much as I can in terms of us as a PTA, and Stuart will help support you in that space as well.
Thank you.
Yep.
Peter?
I guess the continued frustration about putting this amount of effort into a regional land transport plan is the fact that the funding for that regional land transport plan that we're looking at developing in good faith on a bespoke nature for Canterbury keeps getting underfunded. And it would make you depressed actually going into one of these planning processes without the elephant in the room being addressed. And I just feel, I know, look, I'm sympathetic with what you're saying, and it's your job and you do it extremely well. But I think that, and Craig will know this, when you sit at the Regional Transport Committee, and we're very lucky actually that we've had mayors turn up to the Regional Land Transport Committee. I mean, the discussion is always about, you've been there, Jess, you guys have been there. It's always about the roads. It's always about the pet projects like the Ashburton Bridge or the bypass or whatever. And those things seem to overrun the good for the region. And to me, it's a frustration that I don't think the planning process will get you through. I mean, we have, I don't want to get into how the projects get formed up, but it's just the craziness of the whole thing that just disappoints me, really.
I think one good thing that Claire has definitely been helping the RTC with is, understanding that difference between the 5% we currently get of the national pool and probably the 13 or so % we should be getting. And so my view, and I think the mayors are quite sharing this view, is that we should probably pitch for 13% worth of the fund and see where we land. Maybe we should even go beyond 13%, because that's what I think we need to do, is be pretty bold with where we know we should get, but even go further than that. So that's, and I know the mayors and the regional deal stuff, and I was going to ask this later, that's sort of what we're trying to do now, is put that forward to say, well, Canterbury should be getting this, we need to do that. And then the sort of, I don't know, the discussions around what gets prioritised, maybe there's not a bigger battle because there's more money available. Yeah.
Well, I think the empirical evidence would suggest that our roads are in terrible condition. I mean, that day that I had my issue, there were 44 blown tyres between Hinds and Ashburton. 44 on the same bunch of potholes that are still there. And what do they do with them? They just keep pouring stuff into them. They just keep getting worse. When you've got 55-ton trucks running up and down the road, it's like a sponge. It's just craziness.
I know we've got a bit to go, and we only had till 11:30 for the
you
session.
Jump into it.
And I've got a few questions from councillors. So, Claire, is there any key things you want to cover before we get to some questions?
Yeah, just the next slide. So we've got Dr. Cheryl Doig helping with the staff strategy development workshops. So she is a leader in strategic foresight and intergenerational equity, member of the Association of Professional Futurists, adjunct senior fellow at University of Canterbury and peer reviewer for the Journal of Future Studies. And so she's designing up that process to take the transport staff, including your staff, your public transport staff, through that process, and that adds an aspect of folding in uncertainty and risk that the traditional modelling approaches usually used in transport can't account for. So it adds value into the overall transport planning sector to take this approach. So yeah, just thought I'd pop that, let you know that's happening as well. So,
Cool.
yeah, that was pretty
Are you
much.
happy? I mean, we'll take the rest of it as read. I reckon we understand there's a process to go ahead, but I do have questions from. I know Dion had one, Vicky had one earlier. I'll just keep your hands up, everyone else. So where you go?
Yeah,
Dion?
so I wrote down the can we align the ambition to the level of the money that we generate from the road land transport funding, which is what you were saying. But under that, I saw, do we do any economic studies around what money is generated in Canterbury so that we can go, okay, this is the pot that we've got that we generate here, and this is aligned to our ambition.
So last time we did get a consultancy to do that work for us, and they used the population proxy. And then I had also done a piece of work using looking at the composition of the fleet and road user charges to kind of estimate with the transition what might be generated in Canterbury from the road user charge transition. But in terms of how much we spend and then how much value that would create for spending that, it isn't where I've put most of the effort in the project into the strategic thinking. And that table that's been generated that shows the 5%, 13% is really useful. I think one of the tricky things isn't of the main zeal decision around what assurance looks like and what we might have to change in terms of our practices to give assurance around an affordable and feasible plan to the committee. So previously, assurance could have been, well, if central government wants to fund it, it could fund it. Maybe the magic money comes from central government, so it's affordable. I think that we need a bit more robustness underneath that in terms of what's affordable, but we need that to come from NZTA because that is where the money is going to come from. So I've been liaising with the NZTA staff to say, look, this is what we need in order to create an affordable and feasible plan, is we need an indication from you around the level of investment. So I know that they're aware of that and that's a nationwide issue for regional land transport plans. So trying our best, but not wanting to over-invest in as well in the project with the money we've got to run the project.
I think the table that Claire's referring to had those three, had population, ruck, and vehicles kilometres travelled. So it's got multiple criteria to understand what's happening in Canterbury.
Yes.
So, but I agree, Dion.
And you also got how MB tracks how much fuel is sold in this region, and there's a whole multiple of data points that we could probably touch on to get a better, because it's just an easier way for us. Because the next part that I've written down here, Craig, was the influence the GPS before the April 2026 point, and if we have those hard datas or that hard data sets, we around this table, we can then go and talk to those people because that's what they understand. Strategy they don't get so much, but data they do.
Yeah, absolutely. And like the VKT, vehicle kilometres travelled, has been the proxy that we've used in terms of that percentage of funding of the national fund, and where we were sitting at about 5% when we'd ideally be sitting around the sort of 13 to 14%. But certainly as part of the GPS submissions, when we'll get an opportunity to do that, both as a PTA, as a council, but also more broadly as a region, we would want to influence the GPS as best we can. Last time we didn't get a number of projects included in the GPS, which we would like to see. So we'll be picking up and looking at what we did ask for previously and where has that shifted and where do we need to go, but underpinned by evidence as well. The other thing I was just going to comment as well, we are with the Mayoral Forum also working on a pathway to success for regional deals and the economic analysis that comes with that to support a longer term regional deal for Canterbury potentially. So transport is a key part of driving our economy forward. So the evidence to support that as well needs to be reflected through that. So there's a multitude of threads that we can approach this to get the best outcomes for Canterbury.
We also don't direct the organisations who propose the work programs. We prioritise it against a strategic framework for the region. So Waka Kotahi's maintenance program and the level of maintenance that they're planning to do in Canterbury is up to them to propose. So if they don't propose a high level of investment, we can't prioritise it.
And that's where I'm coming to before, influencing this GPS before 2026. And this is where I think we need to be influencing it by before Christmas this year, actually. That's when people will start putting pen to paper, is this time, this side of New Year. So that I want to really make sure that this council has a good chunk of having a good go at it.
Yeah, and I think the regional deal stuff can help with that, Dion. So, and you're going to catch up on that on Monday. So, Vicky.
Yeah, thanks for all the information. There's a lot in here. So one question I had was about the Māori policy framework. So kawa tikanga, I've heard those terms, but rititanga and ahuatanga, I've not come across before. I did have a little look last night on Google. I couldn't find anything that really helped to my understanding. So it'd be useful to get. I don't know if we've got time now. How long have we got, Craig?
No, we're over time.
We are over time. So I wonder maybe send through a link or give a summary to us of what those are, what that is. That would be really helpful. And then a question on the staff strategy development. So you've got a reasonably wide range of organisations that you're looking to have involved. I mean, DOC's in there, ACC, I presume that's the accident people. But Kiwi Rail isn't in there, but we're talking about region, so that would seem like a miss. I'm wondering about there are areas of contracts for like road maintenance and management, and thinking about all the slips and the stability and the pothole generation and all those sorts of things. Like, it would seem to me that one of those sort of big area, I think Canterbury, I don't know how it's chopped up, but it might be useful to have some of that angle come in. And then the freight business. So, I mean, I know Sustainable Business Council, for example, have pulled together a whole cohort of freight companies that are interested in decarbonisation, amongst other things. So it just feels like maybe there's room to sort of, if you're looking at that futures and really needing that wider thinking, that having a bit more of that.
Oh, yeah, sorry. So the stakeholder list is hundreds, and then the workshops is with the organisations that make the investment decisions. So that's a smaller group, and then the people that we've added in with the councils are the ones where we have a statutory mandate. So because transport is so big, the context is so big, that when we looked at the stakeholder list, we don't have a rationale for where we draw the line on who would be in the room or not. You could have disability advocates, it's so wide ranging, the horse riding advocates, and there isn't. So the staff workshops are the government and local government organisations that through other documents have the mandate to work on this. And then the general engagement is all the other potential transport stakeholders.
And I'm hearing that, but if you're looking at the regional, you said you're looking like the bird's eye view, that's sort of like the geotech stability of the network, talking about, you've mentioned AF8, and then also freight is such a significant part across the whole region. That feels to me like that is at the high level, and I just wonder how much might be missed if you're doing futures thinking and trying to be really sort of like creative, innovative, and thinking that some of that other outside of the agencies and the organisations where there's then a more limited, sometimes perhaps it sometimes helps bringing in some other thinking. It helps to create some new thinking.
Good point, Vicky. Well made. Ian?
Yeah, look, I think my question is sort of aligned with what Vicky's asking, but it's a more basic level. You talked about this plan, the regional transport plan, enabling development which aligns with the plan. And Dion has referred to funding from road user charges and petrol taxes and various other forms. But the other side to enabling projects to go ahead, which actually contribute to our transport plan, is the costs. And we know that consenting can be a huge cost. So how how does our this plan enable and align with, if you have projects which are aligned with and enable, how is this plan enabling those, especially through the consenting process? Is there any link to that? Because we've got some major projects coming up, and we know that there are some horrific stories about how much consenting costs can soak up the cost of a project. And if you use the example of the Furton Freight Hub as an example, and when I went to the opening of that, the interesting thing was the District Council, central government and the private enterprise that were behind it were pissed off that actually the regional council here had been an impediment to enabling that project rather than an enabler. And yet the proponents behind it thought it was part of, thought it was aligned with our regional transport plan. So is there a line-up? Is there some way that, if there is a line-up, is there a line-up? If there isn't, is there some way we can get an alignment so that we can enable these projects without, multi-million-dollar consenting costs?
Yeah, and some of this is how the transport sector is structured in terms of planning and funding, which isn't in the scope of the RLTP to solve. So the RLTP is a network lens, but the system is made up of institutions and mechanisms. So how the funding works and the work categories for funding that NZTA has created through the funding system, it's not enabling of innovative transport activities or solutions. So even though the Act is quite broad and says any transport activity by any council and any fund, the reality of it is that it comes down to, is it co-funded by the NLTF and the work categories that they have sitting underneath that?
If I limiting the costs of these projects.
Through your chair, I think there's other processes through the RMA that we obviously would be consenting a proposition like the Furton Freight Hub, and whilst this plan would be strategic in terms of thinking about freight on the network and freight hubbing and those types of things, and that's what we want to invest and support to do, there are other separate processes that run under the RMA, and that is a separate discussion about how enabling that might be in terms of those type of activities under our plans and the regional.
So yeah, I sort of assumed it would be complicated, Jesse, which is what you're referring to. And I get that, but I guess my question then is, how can we enable these projects if they align with the plan?
Well, an RPS would have been quite useful in that regard, probably. I think, Ian, the thing is, it's a real play between the District Council consenting authorities and our consenting authority. So it would involve both, especially if there's stormwater and stuff. So, like our discussion was yesterday, having a joint thing around that could be useful. But that's why it is complicated, because it's both the TAs, and if it crosses across multiple TAs, then both of those have to have a say in it, and then there's the regional consenting. So it is complicated.
But I'm asking that we consider how we can actually simplify that to make us more enabling.
Yeah, and that would probably be through an RPS, but that's not going to happen anymore, because that's one of our real key policies we have that informs district plans and how the rules are set. That's probably where it sits, but yeah. So that's our only lever we would probably have is through an RPS. Is that correct?
The RLTP is the enabling for things like the state
not for
highway
consenting.
network and sorry.
Yeah. So for consenting, it would be what? I mean, we haven't got Andrew here, but
yeah,
that's what I would imagine. It would be our RPS, or under the new RMA that's proposed, the regional environmental plan. But that's still going to be TAs that have to consent land use.
We're also legally required to uphold the RMA framework and the LTMA. So it could be perceived as against the purpose of the LTMA if we subsidised a consenting process as opposed to upholding the user pays process. So I don't know, but I do know we're required under the LTMA to align with the RMA framework.
But if the regional council and the TAs all agree, then it should be easier in theory. Yep.
I'm really conscious of time, and we have an external that was due here a minute ago. I just wanted to comment, Councillor McKenzie, I'm taking on board exactly what you're pointing to. And I think what we need to be able to do is bring these things together, particularly with regard to there will be a new future planning world by virtue of the RM system reforms, but also the infrastructure piece that this government is putting in place. And it may very well be that it's in that context that we need to look at that, and then that would need to be something council needs to endorse if it's your decision, obviously.
Grant, you had a question? We're well over time, just so you know.
No, look, my question is, I'm wondering, because of the complexity of this, I think it would be useful if councillors haven't seen the current regional to maybe put a link through to everybody, just so they can have a look at the scope of all of those things, because it is about the sea, the rail, and the road. But what I was going to quickly say is that next week the South Island Chairs Regional Transport Group are going to present I think it's the South Island Transport story to the Minister, because it's an advocacy approach, which is what we're talking about, getting our fair share across the whole of the South Island.
Aligns with what Dion said earlier on, so cool. Good work. Hey, thanks, team. I know there's a lot in there, and thanks, Claire, for your work that you do in the space, and for making it really interesting for us with your icons. So thank you. Cheers. And hey, it's going to be a big process, so good luck with all of that. Thank you. We're going to go. What we had the under PX session here, but what we're going to do is we're going to go straight to the 11:45 one with our external, and then we'll come back to the other one after lunch. All good?